All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Uncommon Wealth. This show is all about how real entrepreneurs, investors, founders, operators, and business builders actually create wealth, but more importantly, how they keep it. And because let's be honest, making money is one thing, but keeping it through taxes, lawsuits, bad planning, market cycles, partnership issues, and generational transition, that's a completely different game. Today's guest is someone who understands execution at a very high level. Rood has spent more than a decade building businesses in the real estate world through wholesaling, fix and flips, mobile home parks, and through investor education. He's trained investors across the US and Canada and built a reputation around practical execution instead of theory. And what I'm most excited about in this conversation is not just the real estate side. I want to unpack the mindset behind scaling, protecting capital, dealing with risk, creating liquidity, and what happens when successful entrepreneurs, Chris, finally hit the point where they realize, I've built something big and I've got wealth. Now, how do I protect it efficiently? Chris, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me on. I love talking about this because it's not talked about, one, in school, two, in college, or three, just overall. No, not a whole lot of people talk about this. It's just like a hidden secret that everybody should know how to do. And it ain't rocket science.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can have a barbecue with all your business buddies, and it's really not even talked about there as well. So for people that may not know your story, walk us through the early days. What originally pulled you into entrepreneurship and real estate?
Man, I'm one of those guys that's all or nothing. I go 110 miles an hour. Been like that since I was a kid. Been labeled every, learning disability, ADD, ADHD, half retarded. They named every learning disability it could after me. But I mean, it was more of a gift than it was a disability. I come to find out as I got older, I just had a lot of energy, right? So as I got older, out of high school and in college, I knew that I was unemployable. I was just too hard-headed, full energy, really wanted to do my own thing. And started my first business when I was in college, when I was 22, out of the back of my truck, washing cars, changing oil, and fixing auto glass while I was a junior in college. And ended up, by the time I graduated, in 2005, I was making $120,000 a year. That was a lot of money back then for a 22-year-old in 2005. So when my buddies decided they're going to go to, get jobs making 35, 40 grand a year, I was like, dude, I'm making triple that, double and a half that. I'm not going to get a job. I'm going to focus on this. So I doubled down on my auto business, mobile, quick lube, car wash, auto glass business, and did really well, but, kind of hit a wall, because I knew I couldn't just chase everything around. You can't scale that model. I needed to be able to have some physical locations. And this is 2006. Let me back up. 2005, ended up getting my first shop that I leased from a motivated seller. 2006, I sold my primary residence and 1031 exchanged. Well, no, I didn't say 30-way exchange. I just sold it because I had been living there longer than 2 years, so it was tax-free money. I later did a 1031 exchange on some other properties, but I took that money and I bought another physical location 3 months before the 2008 crash. I mean, it was pure luck. I ended up made $126,000. I was 25 years old, 26 years old. It was a lot of money back then, and I rolled it into buying another physical quick lube mechanic shop. Then the market crashed. I ended up buying a foreclosure, lived in that for about 18 months, flipped that, made 70, 80 grand on that, took that, used it as a down payment to buy another mechanic shop, flipped some properties, ended up making a few bucks there. I kept flipping real estate to buy more mechanic shops and quick lubes. Ended up getting up to 4 locations, 33 employees. I was 26, 27 at the time, and focused on that for a while, got away from real estate, and ended up going back into real estate because I ended up having so many kids, and I just didn't want to sit there and not be home. And real estate got me here. Real estate can, get me back into making, building wealth. Because I feel like I was on a treadmill working 6 days a week. But anyway, fast forward a few years later, I got back into real estate full time. I hired some mentors, started wholesaling, flipping properties. Had an exit. I sold my mechanic shops to one of the largest quick lube mechanic shops in the country, Express Oil. Had a nice exit there. Did a 1031 exchange. Bought some nice property on the beach. Went all in on real estate. Then ended up in the past 10 years, I bought 19 mobile home parks, 12 short-term vacation rentals on the beach. A slew of single-family homes, some small apartment complexes, and I've built 4 developments, larger developments, which we're exiting right now, and vertically integrated back into the trades. Own an HVAC company, junk removal business. I have a mobile home dealership that we sell mobile homes to investors all over the country. Yeah, that's kind of the skinny on it.
Dude, were there any moments where what were the hardest lessons in the beginning, I guess, is the question I want to ask. What were some of those things in the beginning that just kind of slapped you in the face?
Thinking that things are always going to be good when you're young and you don't understand market cycles, and you don't understand that, when things are really good, they're going to be bad. And when things are really bad, guess what? They're going to get good again. Not being old enough and wise enough and have enough experience to have enough emotional intelligence to be able to not freak out when the market pulls back, because it's the natural cycle of things. No different than, we have summer, winter, fall, winter, spring, summer again. It's cycles. And when I started my first business when I was 22, I was like, man, this is great. You can just, if you hustle and you know how to talk to people and you do a good job, you can just make all the money you want. Until things slow down, right? Until money's not being circulated. So I would say that was probably the biggest punch in the gut as a younger entrepreneur, is understanding when things slow down and why, and it's going to be okay, and having the temperament to not lose your fucking mind when you're younger, when you're like, holy shit, like you're not making the money you used to, knowing it's going to be okay, things are going to come back.
And one thing I see with high level entrepreneurs is eventually they reach a point where they just stop chasing the money and they start chasing efficiency. Because once your revenues start to scale, you start realizing the game's changed. It now becomes about tax efficiency, asset protection, capital preservation, strategic liquidity, control. You already mentioned an exit, but exit optionality. Did you have a moment where you experienced that shift personally?
Absolutely. I would piggyback on what you just said. Being an entrepreneur is not about being brilliant. It's more about surviving. This is why academics can't be entrepreneurs, because it takes so much mental fortitude and temperament to survive, because it's more about balls than it is brains. I mean, not that you can be a dummy and do that. You got to be smart. But the temperament that's needed to be an investor long term and be what I call a cyclical player is not for the faint of heart. You're going to have moments where you doubt and question yourself and ask yourself, is this even worth it? But the longer you do it, the more you understand it, the more wise you become, and you're able to navigate through this crazy ride of entrepreneurship. And you learn to pick up on different strategies to help preserve your wealth. You talked a lot about this in the beginning, preserving your wealth and tax deference and retirement, and being able to transfer wealth over. I mean, I just finished writing a book called Skill Up on what you just talked about, and I've had to coin the term fast, medium, and slow money, because you need to understand the velocity of money and how you get paid, and the benefits and differentiation of active income, midterm flipping, and say buy and hold, and how to not pay taxes legally, morally, and ethically, and how to keep it all together at the same time. Because if you don't understand the tax code, dude, you could work your ass off and make $500,000, as a blue collar tradesman. I come from the blue collar trades. And then you wake up and it's the end of the year and you think you did well, you netted $500,000, to the good after everything, or even say it's $1 million. And you wake up and you having to write a check for $350,000, $400,000 to Uncle Sam, and you sick to your stomach because you feel like you've been working to feed Uncle Sam. But there's a legal way to not, or at least to defer or offset those taxes by understanding the real estate game. And I don't think you understand, being good at business doesn't make you good at real estate. Being good at real estate doesn't necessarily make you good at business, but I think you need to be good at both. If you're going to play at a high level and you're going to be able to keep most of your wealth, you better understand the tax code. And that goes for depreciation, 1031 exchanges, cost segregation studies. There's a legal way to offset all this stuff. And if you don't understand that as an entrepreneur, you're literally running at 70% and giving 30% of your 30 to 35, sometimes 40%, depending on what state you live in, away to the government, and they're going to just burn it and waste it.
You're speaking like a guy who's had some tax frustrations in the past and kind of realized that through the process. So that's a part of a big part of what I talk about. Entrepreneurs think if I just make more money, everything gets easier. But what actually happens is complexity increases, taxes increase, liability increases, your entities get more and more, your exposure gets greater. So you're talking like someone that's been there and done that. When did you start to realize that the tax mitigation component was crucial to retaining a lot of your money?
Man, I read a book by a rich dad advisor, one of Robert Kiyosaki's advisors, called Tax-Free Wealth. I read that probably 17, 18 years ago. It was a great book on how to not pay taxes and how to play the legal tax code, how to understand it. That really opened my eyes. I mean, look, if you're going to build wealth, you can't be long term to give to your kids. You can't be no dummy. Like you got to understand things, and you got to understand how money works and how the rich and elite shelter, protect, and mitigate all of their losses through trust, through the tax code. And, I've always had a high interest in wanting to, keep what I've earned. I mean, I don't like sharing. I don't like giving money to the government. They burn it. They're so inefficient. They don't run the government like a business. And it's just sick to my stomach watching how they run the government. So I'm like, I'd rather not pay those cocksuckers a dime. And I figured out every way possible not to have to write them a check. And look, here's the thing. Your CPA is not going to help you. Your CPA is a tax compliant officer for the IRS. They are not a tax strategist. I have to tell my CPA what to do in a lot of cases because he's working on 100 files of other customers. He's just trying to get them a tax return and tell them how much they owe. He's not telling them how they can not pay taxes. They can give you some pointers. It behooves you as an entrepreneur and a professional real estate investor to study the tax code. And it's not that complicated. The academics will make it seem like it's complicated, but you just need to understand depreciation, 1031 exchanges, and cost segregation studies, right? I mean, if you understand that in real estate, now there's probably a bunch of other stuff that I don't know about. I don't know everything. I just know the real estate side of it. But I know those three things right there have saved me millions of dollars in taxes that I can keep for myself and give it to my kids or put it in a trust and hold assets. And if I have an exit, if I sell a property, I don't have to write a check for 30 to 40% of the net profits of it.
You are hitting a bullseye on exactly what I talk about on a daily basis with clients and prospective clients. And I talk about on my YouTube channel and this podcast. It's not the CPA's fault, right? They're overworked, their compliance form, right? Like you talked about. But unfortunately, they've been put in this category of called trusted advisor. And I'm not bashing CPAs out there because they provide a valuable service. How hard was it for you to get your CPA to implement the strategies that you wanted them to implement on your tax documents and your tax strategy? Or did you have to get a new one altogether?
No, I just had to. I'll give you a case in point. So this year, I hadn't paid taxes in 11 years, going on 11 years, because I buy so much real estate. We do a lot of 1031 exchanges. We do a lot of cost segregation studies. I have to like my CPA called me. He's like, "Hey, you're going to owe 73,000 this year." I said, "No, I'm not." He goes, "What you mean? No, you're not?" I said, "We never did a cost segregation on this, and that property. We're going to do cost segs on those 3 properties or 2 of them if we got to, and we're going to offset the whole thing." He says, "Okay, yeah, no problem. We can do that." Well, why didn't you tell me that? Because it's not his job to tell me that. That's why I'm telling you, if you just sitting there leaving it up to a CPA just because he has this fancy diploma. Listen, Jim Rome once said, "A formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune." You have to educate yourself first and foremost. You can't leave it up to everybody else to tell you how to build wealth. Building wealth is not cut out and meant for everybody. It is so hard. It takes everything out of you. And then if you could work like an animal and just work yourself to death and make a lot of money, but then if you don't understand the knowledge part of it, how to keep it, dude, you're just going to throw your hands up. I know people that intentionally don't make more money or take on more jobs because they don't want to pay more taxes. Because they just don't know. They're like, "Oh, no, I made enough this year. I don't want to pay more taxes. All I'm going to end up doing is doing all that work and having to write more checks. I'm good." If they knew how to not pay taxes legally, morally, and ethically, and knew how to play the real estate game and mix it up with their business, you gotta have business acumen mixed up with real estate acumen and skills to truly play the game at a high level, to where you maximize your wealth and your output and your labor and your revenue. You have to understand the game, and there's no better way to understand the game to not pay taxes is through real estate investing. If you're an entrepreneur, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and real estate is interesting because it creates wealth like you're talking about, but it can also create concentration risk and liquidity constraints,
Yep.
especially when someone's net worth is tied up inside deals, equity, and properties. How do you personally think about balancing, the aggressive nature of that real estate mindset with liquidity and flexibility?
Yep. That's such a good question. And you're exactly right. There's a lot of operators right now that have, money tied up in properties that they can't refinance. And, for me, so I talk about this in my book, you got to recycle assets, right? Every asset eventually will become a liability. So you want to time it to where you don't want to, I'm always buying and selling. I try to buy 50% of the time and sell 50% of the time. Like I bought 19 mobile home parks in the past 11 years, but I'm selling that whole portfolio right now. I've been selling 3 or 4 parks a year, and I've been, 1031 exchanging the money into newer, nicer quality assets on the beach or short-term luxury vacation homes. Or what I'll do is I won't do a 1031 exchange, and I'll take some of the profits and I'll pay off an asset. I'll pay it off 100%, and then I'll go to my bank and do what's called a line of credit, and they'll give me 80% loan to value. I'll refinance, give all my money back, tax-free, 80% loan to value, and I do a cost segregation study. That's just playing the game at a high level where I don't pay any taxes. I might sell a property, make $1 million. That's a legal way not to pay taxes and get all my cash back.
100%. And what mistakes do you see investors making with debt?
Over leveraging. I mean, you're seeing it now. I mean, investors right now are getting hammered. There's a lot of syndicators that are about to go under. I know a lot of personal syndicators that they just, they thought the music wasn't going to stop. They thought that operations didn't matter. They thought they could just buy all over the country without good, solid boots on the ground. It's just, dude, it ain't that simple and it ain't that easy. Everybody looks like a rock star with no guitar when the market's inflating like crazy and you have double-digit inflation. Everybody looks like a rock star. But when the music pulls back and interest rates double and insurance doubles, if you didn't buy the steal of a deal, like you got to be a unicorn chaser. You got to buy deals so cheap and so value add, meaning there's so much upside to protect and hedge and mitigate yourself from market pullbacks. Because an okay deal turns into a terrible deal when the market pulls back. A unicorn deal turns into an okay deal when the market pulls back. So that tells you how much of a margin you got to have a huge degree of margin of error. in everything you do.
One thing I've noticed working with high net worth entrepreneurs and investors is many of them are unintentionally overexposed to those illiquid assets. Their money's trapped in businesses, properties, private equity investments. And ironically, some of the wealthiest people on paper have the least amount of accessible strategic liquidity, which becomes a massive issue during, like you're saying, economic downturns. They don't have opportunity to take advantage of windows, right? Where there's a good opportunity. It provides banking disruptions, estate events, tax obligations. Have you seen that happen in your world? Have you seen that play out with people that you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's happened with me. I've had to sell off a few assets because I became, illiquid where I needed access to capital. But the properties, like back to what I said about being a unicorn tracer, all the properties I bought so good in great areas that the better the deal, the more liquid they are, right? If you just bought a not that great of a deal, it's hard to get to sell it. So I try to make sure that I buy assets in great areas with a huge margin of error with a lot of equity. That way I can still give it away and get reliquefied. And that's what I've done. And I stay diversified. I don't stay stuck in just one asset class. Like a mobile home park, that's kind of hard to sell. There's only so many buyers, but I mix up single family homes with mobile home parks or short-term vacation rentals with land development. I've got fast, medium, and slow money going, which I've coined in my book. It's just the velocity of how you get paid and how dangerous or how fast you get paid, and its pros and cons and its benefits. So for instance, if I needed cash, I could piecemeal off a single family home, put it on MLS for sale and sell it within 30 to 60 days and, make 100, 120,000 or 80,000, 50,000, whatever it may be to reliquefy. So in addition to that, if you're just a purist real estate investor, that shit doesn't fly anymore because cash flow has been destroyed by interest rates and insurance, cost of labor and material. I never depended on just residual positive cash flow from rental property to sustain my lifestyle. Always had, which I call fast money, which are businesses. I own a lot of businesses. I own mobile home dealerships that print money every month. I still flip houses and wholesale. I've got a junk removal. I got an HVAC company. My wife's a realtor. She still gets paid on. You have to have layers of income. You cannot depend on one income stream, even two these days. The average millionaire, I believe, has 7 income streams. And that's not for the faint of heart. That's why I say this isn't for everybody. Like some people are like, holy shit, I got to have 7 income streams. If you want to build wealth, yes. If you want to just chill and live a coast through life and make 100 grand a year, 150 grand a year, and you're okay with that, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. This is not for everybody, but you have to be very dynamic as a real estate investor and entrepreneur. You can't just get stuck in one asset class, even if you have a business that just prints money. I was talking to a guy who lives in my neighborhood yesterday. I was fishing in my pond and he came by, talked to him. He was telling me he paid $2 million in taxes this year. I was like, dude, $2 million in taxes. He owns a directional drilling company in the oil field. He makes shit ton of money. But he paid $2 million in taxes because he just doesn't understand the real estate game enough to go buy real estate. And I said, well, look, dude, let's go have lunch. Dude, if you're paying $2 million in taxes, we need to talk because you got a serious problem. So
Yeah.
Once again, you got to be dynamic, even if you do have a business that just absolutely destroys it and you don't need to be diversified. You need it to be diversified in the sense you need to understand tax deference, tax strategy, and how to not pay taxes legally, morally, and ethically. And the best way to do that I know of is investing in real estate in great quality assets and holding long-term and doing 1031 exchanges. And then once you do that, do a cost segregation study to offset it as much as possible. And if you do that, man, it puts your wealth building on hyperdrive because you'll keep 30 to 40% of your wealth. Just imagine if you pay, let's just say you pay, I don't know, maybe you're paying $300,000 or $400,000 a year in taxes. Most people are going to work, 45, 50 years of their life, maybe 55, 60 years, just call it 55 years of their life. You do 55 times 400 grand of how much you pay in taxes every year. And you did the math of how much you're going to keep. Do the math. You have a calculator. What's What's 55? Let's just do 50. Even do 45 because most people probably won't get to that till they're probably 30. Do 45 times 350,000 a year.
Yeah, it's $15.7 million.
That's how much money in 50 years you're going to pay in taxes if you don't understand the tax code.
Well, that was 35 years. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
I'm sorry,
45 years. Yeah.
yeah, 45 years, dude. You know what you could do? You
Now,
can,
I was talking to a business owner. I was talking to a business owner yesterday. He's paid $1 million in taxes over the last 2 years. And I'm like, what's going on with your CPA? And he's like, John, I'm with one of the most reputable CPA firms out there. And I'm like, there's a difference between proactive and reactive, right? There's a difference between filling out compliance forms for you and giving you actual tax strategy. To your point, Chris, what you're talking about, and I would agree. There's a lot of tax mitigation benefits inside of the real estate space. And the other thing that's sexy about the real estate is it's an appreciating asset. It can be a cash flowing asset at the same time. But there are also tax mitigation strategies for that guy. There's tax mitigation strategies that are reactive in nature, but then there are proactive tax mitigation strategies like you're talking about going forward. And so you're right. That's the conversation. How do you, on a go forward basis, create a legal, ethical, moral structure to minimize your taxes down to what you feel like is appropriate?
that's right, legally, morally, and ethically. I had to coin that word too. It's all in my book, Skill Up. I highly
Yeah.
advise if you watch this and you want to build wealth in real estate and business, read that book. It's how I built a high net worth using the
We're going
strategies
to put
that
a
I
link to it in the description section. So what's the name of the book again?
skill up. The
Scale
logical
Up.
way, skill, SKILL, skill up, the logical way to build wealth in real estate logically.
I love
Like
it. I love it.
it's simple strategies not to pay taxes and how to build wealth. But at the end of the day, it's all a game. You just got to learn the rules. You got to learn where the boundary lines are, and you got to work the gray area. And there's more ways to not pay taxes. I mean, you can buy, maybe you're a land developer, or maybe you're a farmer. You can buy more equipment. I don't want to say that real estate's the only way, but I would say it's the most tried and true way. Because you go buy a tractor, if you're a farmer, that's a depreciating asset that doesn't really cash flow. Yes, it helps drive revenue because it's a tool for the service that you offer if you're a farmer. But, I'd rather buy a piece of real estate in a great area that cash flows and it depreciates, but it appreciates at the same time also. It depreciates.
100%. And at some point, go ahead. Go ahead. My bad.
Well, it depreciates on paper, but it appreciates in reality.
Yeah, exactly right. And if you, to your point, you employ the 1031 exchange strategy, go to a different property, a bigger property, and then you take a line of credit or against that asset, you've created liquidity with tax-free dollars. 100% on the same page, man. But at some point, the conversation evolves beyond just money, Chris, and it becomes, well, what happens to everything I've built? How has your thinking around legacy evolved as your businesses have grown?
Man, I'm 45. Me and my wife talk about this all the time. I need to start a trust. We've been talking about that for years, but we're selling off a lot of assets right now. We're gonna have a huge tax liability, but we've been rolling over a lot of the money buying more beachfront. I love beachfront properties. Me and my wife have 11 of them. We're selling off a lot of stuff and just we're upgrading our portfolio, right? We're just buying in newer, nicer, better quality assets, and a beachfront property it's so rare, and if you get in the right area that they for the most part always appreciate because it's scarce, right? It's rarity, it's scarcity.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah.
give my kids a bunch of rental property of mobile home parks, apartments, or even single family homes. I want to better give them an asset that's a very desirable asset they have memories of, and in 40 years from now when I'm gone, well, hopefully I'm fucking 45. 40 years, I'll be 85. Hopefully I'm still alive. But let's say 60 years from now, I'll be 105. I'm dead. That's an asset that's only going to go up in value. I like to buy beautiful property before anybody else finds about it and hold it forever.
Well,
That's my motto.
let's talk offline about a trust structure that I can refer you to an attorney on helping you with all of that and mitigating those future taxes as much as legally and ethically and morally possible. It's one of the things that I'm very passionate about. But one thing I constantly see is people spend their entire lives building wealth, but almost no time building the infrastructure around the wealth, which is what we're talking about here. And those are two completely different skill sets, talking about skill up, right?
Yep.
Because preserving wealth requires governance, planning, liquidity engineering, tax mitigation, legal, insulation, strategic ownership structures, intra-family or international transfer systems. Otherwise, families end up forced into liquidation fire sales, IRS problems, estate tax issues, partnership conflicts between GPs and LPs, probate complications, forced liquidations, and most of those are preventable with proper planning.
Yep.
So, Chris, let's shift gears for a little. Rapid fire. First thing that comes to mind. What's the hardest business lesson you learned the hard way?
Cash is not trash. A lot of
Mm,
people want to say cash is trash. But yeah, it is. It is somewhat trash in an inflationary environment, but cash is optionality. It gives you choices. So when you just,
yes.
if you go and you take all your cash and all you do is just buy up a bunch of assets, and look, I'm not beating up investing because I built a high net worth from doing that, especially the past 10 years when, I took all of my cash and put it into assets because the market was, going up so fast. I did great. However, when the market pulled back, and even my businesses, slowed down, I had some cash crunches, nothing terrible. I had to sell off a few assets, but I would tell you, you got to stay balanced. It's logical,
Yeah.
right? Stay balanced, buy assets, but also build liquidity and shelter the liquidity from having a large tax burden by buying real estate with it, but also learning the art of OPM, using other people's money to buy the asset and keep your liquidity. That's the best of both worlds. You can use other people's money. I raise a lot of capital and I buy the assets and I use their money, but I keep my own cash as a safety net.
Love it. Love it. All right. Another quick hitter. Cash flow or equity?
Depends on the asset class. From a real estate perspective, I think equity is more important than cash flow because unlike a business, you can't drive revenue with rental property. You're kind of set to a certain margin of rents. In business, you can drive revenue by creating more marketing, more sales, better operations, getting more new customers. Where if you got a 30 unit mobile home park or 80 unit apartment complex, you're kind of capped on how much cash flow. So from a real estate perspective, I would say equity is senior to cash flow, but it still needs to at least cover the debt service and put a little bit of money in your pocket. But when cash flow fails in real estate, equity saves you because if you bought
Love
right,
it.
you can get out of that asset. Now, from a business perspective, cash flow is more important than equity. But from real estate, it's the opposite, but you need both. And you want to toggle between both, and you want to have both in your portfolio. You want to have businesses and you want to have real estate. And that's kind of what I talk about a lot in my book, Skill Up, about fast, medium, and slow money and staying diversified and vertically integrated. You want to vertically integrate. You want to start businesses like you have the main platform business, like my main platform business is real estate investing. But I own a lot of other services and businesses that are tied to real estate, mobile home dealerships. I own a short-term vacation property management company. That's vertical integration. I own a junk removal. We have to do a lot of trash outs. I own an HVAC company. I get a lot of calls from my rental property. The AC goes out. I own all those businesses in-house. That's vertical integration.
Yeah. What scares you more, taxes, inflation, or government overreach?
I would say the biggest detriment, I've studied a lot of world history, and I would say number one, inflation, but I would piggyback that with saying that inflation is caused by government. So that government may be senior to inflation because the government causes inflation because they print more
Mm-hmm.
money. So with that said, I have to say government overreach is probably number one, followed by inflation. Inflation kills societies. It killed Rome. It killed the Weimar Republic. It killed Venezuela. It killed Argentina in the 2000s. It killed Cuba, and it's currently killing the United States, all by design. Don't get me started politically, because I'll go run off on a tangent, but it's all by design. This hasn't happened. This has happened before. The Romans did it. The Romans were chipping their gold coins and silver coins and debasing their currency because they overspend, because they don't run the government like a business. So they print money.
100%.
And they call it quantitative easing. They call it reliquifying. Yeah, but if we did that, we go to jail, because it's called counterfeiting, because that's all they're doing. It's just it's semantics gymnastics, right? It's word gymnastics. Quantitative easing is stealing from our future. It causes inflation, and it's money printing. It's stealing, period. But if we did it, we go to jail, because they call it counterfeiting. But the government does it all day, every day.
I was at a family office conference in Puerto Rico last week, and Peter Schiff was there, Harry Dent was there, and they're selling their gold, right? They're basically selling their precious metals in their gold fund, and those types of things. But you're exactly right. You're piggybacking off of what they said, which is, the governments just print more money. They don't run it. It'll never run out of money. It will devalue the dollar, and inflation will run rampant, but the governments will never run out of money. That's a whole different podcast on a whole different episode that we can get into that.
Yeah. And that's why you have to buy assets. Like, I feel bad for the middle class that their only asset is their home, right? Their home they live in, because Robert Kiyosaki says it all the time: savers are losers. And he's right, but you can also overinvest and over leverage and blow yourself up as an investor. So you got to stay balanced. You need liquidity. You definitely need cash, but you don't want to have too much of it. But you have to learn how to buy assets and start businesses. Dude, I mean, I feel bad for people that are not entrepreneurial. I really do, because the entrepreneurs are always the one that figure shit out. If you're stuck in a W-2 job making $150,000, $200,000 a year, man, you're being squeezed. And if you don't reinvest, I mean, dude, I hate to say it, but you're fucked. There's no retirement.
Chris, this has been an incredible, this has been an incredible conversation. And honestly, one thing I appreciate hearing from people that have actually built something in the real world, not theory, not social media fluff, actual real world execution. Before we wrap up, for the entrepreneurs, founders, business owners listening right now that are scaling quickly and starting to think more seriously about protecting wealth, creating liquidity, reducing their tax exposure, and building long-term infrastructure, what advice would you give them?
The greatest asset that you're going to own is right here. Because you can't buy assets, right? You can't negotiate. You can't understand what assets to buy and how to buy them and what areas if you're not, like I say all the time, skilled up. You need skills.
Mm-hmm.
Skills turn into money, period. I mean, if you don't rehab this right here first before you start investing, dude, you're never going to build anything. Nobody's built anything that hasn't at least one studied, or two has really thought through everything, and three executes. Because I know a lot of people that studied to the cows come home and they just don't execute. They don't take action, because they have analysis paralysis, right? You also can't, over analyze everything. You're going to make mistakes. Look, I bought 19 mobile home parks in the past 11 years. Out of the 19, I lost money on 2 of them. The hard thing about being an entrepreneur is that you're expected to bat 1,000, right? Your batting average is supposed to be 1,000. If we bat, look, in the major leagues, if you bat 300, you're going to the Hall of Fame. As an entrepreneur, you bat 300, you're going to the poorhouse.
Mm.
You can't be no dummy and do this. You better skill up. You better get the right information. The way you do that is you educate yourself through books, seminars, masterminds, lectures. Dude, I've spent over $1 million in personal development. I've been to all, I've read every book Robert Kiyosaki's wrote. I've read hundreds and hundreds of books. And I've been to a lot of seminars and I've hired coaches. I've been to a lot of masterminds. I put on my own personal mastermind called Allies Mastermind to help people with building wealth in business and real estate. Just get around other people that are building wealth and get away. You know, I call it no friends, only allies. That's the theme of my mastermind, because your friends are not going to help you build wealth. Matter of fact, your friends will actually get mad at you if you start doing better than them, because your friends don't want you to do better than them, unbeknownst to what they're going to tell you in front of you. But behind your back, you start making more money than your friends and even your family. They're going to start shitting on you. That's why it's super important to keep your circle tight, your money even tighter and closer, and get around people that move in the same bandwidth and wavelength as you. They're trying to get rich and wealthy too. And that's the way you move. You move around other guys that are doing the same thing. Wolves move in packs, right? And they kill in packs. And I love working with great allies. I have a lot of partnerships, and you know, all of my allies are people that are just like me. We're wealth and growth minded, and we're trying to build wealth and live our best life.
I love it, man. I love it. Chris, brother, appreciate you coming on. For everyone listening, if you got value from this episode, make sure you follow, subscribe, and share this with another entrepreneur, investor, or business owner who needs to hear it. Chris's social media links, the link to his book, Skill Up, is in the description section. And I'll leave everybody with this. Building wealth is important, but preserving wealth, creating liquidity, reducing unnecessary taxes, protecting your family, and engineering long-term control over your financial life, that's an entirely different level of thinking. And unfortunately, most people wait until there's a problem before they address it. Don't wait. We'll see you guys on the next episode of Uncommon Wealth. Chris, thank you, man.
Thank you.